Welcome you all to my class on Preface to Shakespeare by Samuel Johnson. Dear students, it's our second class on Preface to Shakespeare. And in our first class, we emphasized on the approach towards antiquity, that means Samuel Johnson's attitude towards antiquity. And in our previous class, I explained that Samuel Johnson also thought that people have a common perception of giving priority and prominence to the writers of the past, and they have a general tendency to ignore the writers of the present. And not only that, basically the writers of the past are evaluated in terms of their strength, in terms of their exclusive works, and the writers of the present, they are evaluated in terms of their weakness and their rather weak writing. So that is the common perception. But Johnson claims that he will evaluate Shakespeare from an unbiased point of view. And let's see what he does. And we also discussed, the enduring eminence of William Shakespeare when Johnson wrote this essay. It was already 100 years, and Shakespeare's popularity was gaining momentum, and instead of declining, the popularity of William Shakespeare was increasing day by day. So that's what Samuel Johnson emphasized. And he also gave an indication that he was going to evaluate Shakespeare through his merits and demerits. So it's a very tough job that Shakespeare, one of the greatest playwrights of all time the world has ever witnessed, is being judged by Samuel Johnson. And at first, Johnson talks about the merits of William Shakespeare. And when he will explain the merits of William Shakespeare, naturally, dear students, you may agree with Johnson, you may not agree with Johnson. But since we are, the students of literature, so we should have a rational bent of mind, and we have to listen to what Johnson says first. And after that, we will also try to criticize Johnson also. Criticism doesn't mean to find out the weakness of a person, but to find out the truth, from your point of view. So, what is the benefit of criticizing a writer or criticizing some texts? The benefit is that when you criticize a text, when you are a critic, not simply criticizing, when you are a critic, you basically look at the text very closely. You try to unveil and unfold the inner meaning of the text, and look at the text from different perspective, so your understanding of the text becomes clearer. So from that point of view, criticism is necessary. So what about the merits of Shakespeare according to Johnson? So the first point that Johnson discusses in his essay is, and the reason why he thinks that Shakespeare was extraordinary, that just representation of general nature. So what is nature? Nature, that means what we see around us. I mean, everything is included in nature. But virtually, what Wordsworth said and what Johnson is also saying in this criticism or in this essay, that the natural surroundings, so what did, and not only that, apart from the natural surroundings, the human nature is also included over here. So what about the natural surroundings? Sometimes we see that there is a kind of exaggeration, even in William Wordsworth. What we see, that Wordsworth glorifies nature. So when he he explains beauty of a flower, when he discusses the beauty of a flower, daffodils flowers, he doesn't find anything wrong in the flower. He doesn't find anything wrong in nature. Wordsworth never found anything wrong in the objects of nature. Rather, what Wordsworth found, he found something, idealized. He found the presence of God in nature. So, according to Wordsworth, there is no evil in nature. So, it's a kind of glorification of nature. So that is the point of view of William Wordsworth. But William Wordsworth definitely came later, but still, I am just trying to compare him with William Shakespeare and basically with the outlook with which Johnson is looking at Shakespeare. So, whenever the term nature comes, naturally, William Wordsworth comes. And what Johnson says that Shakespeare didn't, either exaggerate nature or did not undermine the importance of nature. And he was realistic. Shakespeare's portrayal of nature, his delineation of nature, was rather realistic and practical. And this is something very special about William Shakespeare. It is the just representation of general nature that brings immortality and enduring approbation to literary works. A faithful portrayal of the prevailing manners of combinations of fanciful inventions is insufficient to confer immortality upon a work of art. Such pieces can only evoke pleasure or wonder which is soon exhausted. So what Johnson says that if you exaggerate nature or if you undermine nature, what happens? That for the time being you may find some pleasures, but actually in future with the passage of time, this writing loses its glamour and brightness, because what is real, it prevails over ages. It stays and it goes beyond time and place. So from this point of view, Shakespeare is really extraordinary according to Johnson, that Shakespeare shows nature as it is. There is no exaggeration and there is no indication to undermine the significance of nature, the beauty of nature. So nature is not all the time ugly, nature is not all the time beautiful. It is only truth that can afford a consistent place for the mind to rest upon. So what Johnson says, that only truth prevails over time. So if there is anything false, if there is anything wrong in the portrayal of nature, it will not last for a long time. So Shakespeare's portrayal of nature was genuine, it was real. And that is why Shakespeare's dramas are surviving and they are going beyond time and place. Shakespeare is more than anyone else a poet of nature. So Shakespeare is termed as a poet of nature by Johnson. Through his works, he reflects life. So Shakespeare reflects life, according to Johnson. Shakespeare's characters do not belong to the society of a particular place or time. Very significant. Very, very significant. And this point of Samuel Johnson is really praiseworthy. He is really, true, and Johnson is really extraordinary and practical in his analysis or evaluation of Shakespeare when he says that Shakespeare's characters are not confined to a particular society, place, or time. That makes Shakespeare classic. Macbeth, Hamlet, Julius Caesar, King Lear, Othello. Some of them are kings, dukes, princess. Now it doesn't matter that this king is a particular king. So the tragedy of a Hamlet is not the tragedy of Hamlet alone. This type of tragedy can happen to any Hamlet across the world. So the tragedy of Macbeth is not a tragedy of Macbeth alone. This sort of tragedy may happen, and obviously it has happened to many persons across the globe. So the foolishness of King Lear and the arrogance of King Lear and the weakness or tragic flaw of King Lear and Othello. So these tragic flaws are not simply the tragic flaws of a king or of an army officer alone. So they are individuals. Obviously, they are individuals. Macbeth is different from Hamlet. Hamlet is different from King Lear. King Lear is different from Othello. So every individual being portrayed by William Shakespeare has a different characteristic, but this different character is also a representative of hundreds and thousands of characters living in the universe in different ages. So they are individuals, but being Despite being individuals, they're representative of thousands of their kind. So that is important. And they cannot be confined to a particular place in society. They are universal, representing every man, so they become every man. The problem of King Lear, or the arrogance of King Lear, the mistake committed by King Lear, is not a mistake simply committed by the king alone. It's a kind of mistake that parents, I mean fathers across the world are committing over and again, and the daughters are betraying their fathers, in different ages and in different countries of the world. They are the genuine progeny of common humanity, such as will always remain in this world and whom our eyes will always continue to meet. So King Lear didn't vanish. King Lear died, but the characters like King Lear, they didn't vanish. They are born in this world. They were in the past. They are living even in our present time, and they will be there in future. So what motivates these characters to speak and act are those general principles and emotions which stir all hearts, whereas in the works of other poets, a character is often an individual. So what Johnson wants to make clear over here, that when we compare Shakespeare with other writers or other playwrights or other poets, you can say, what we see that in those writers, poetry or drama, the characters are highly individualized and they cannot be representatives of hundreds of characters. But Shakespeare's characters, though they are individuals, still these individuals are basically representatives of millions of characters of the past, present, and future. So that makes Shakespeare different from others, and that makes Shakespeare a classic. Shakespeare, it is commonly a species. So Shakespeare's characters are individuals, but they are basically species of a kind. Hamlet is a species. There are many Hamlets. There are hundreds of Hamlets in the world. There were Hamlets in the past. There are Hamlets in present, and there will be Hamlets in future. So Hamlet is an individual representing, I am telling you repeatedly, representing thousands and millions of Hamlets. The wide expanse of Shakespeare's design is the main source of the wealth of instruction that his plays convey. And owing to this fact, they are filled with practical axioms and domestic wisdom. So Shakespeare's plays, since the characters are basically they represent species of a kind, that's why their conversation always unfold, always unveil the domestic wisdom or the wisdom of people, the common people living in our society. Critics used to say that even verse of Euripides is essentially a precept in itself, and it may be said of Shakespeare's plays that a whole pantheon of civil and economic prudence may be collected from them. So if you read Shakespeare's play, he has been compared with Euripides. That Euripides' every single sentence was like a like a proverb. And Shakespeare's plays, if you read those plays closely, you will see that you will get hundreds and thousands and plenty of uh, what should I say, information, knowledge, and analysis about life from his writing, from his dialogues. So his dialogues, apart from telling, apart from giving you the practical life, apart from giving you the realistic portrayal of life, they also give you ideas of the existing order and customs and tradition of a society. Not only that, the behavior, civil behavior of a community, the economic condition of a community or of a society. So the social realities are present in Shakespeare's plays. The civilians are also present in Shakespeare's plays. The economic reality is present in Shakespeare's plays. The individual's reality is obviously present in Shakespeare's plays. So from all this point of view, Shakespeare basically, according to Johnson, he portrayed nature, not only nature that exists around us or the natural objects. Apart from that, the nature of human beings is also very clear and is also very tangible in Shakespeare's plays. Now, particular passages, but in the total progress of the fable and the tenor of the dialogue that Shakespeare's spontaneity is unfolded. To reveal his genius through singled out passages is like describing the endurance and beauty of a house by showing a brick. So, if you want to enjoy the beauty of Shakespeare, you have to enjoy the play as a whole. You have to enjoy the poem as a whole. So if you just extract some dialogues from his plays, and if you want to, evaluate Shakespeare in terms of dialogues, some dialogues, particular dialogues, then it will be a kind of injustice to Shakespeare. Because if you want to value the beauty of a building by judging a single brick as a specimen, it will be an injustice to that building. Similarly, it will be an injustice to William Shakespeare if you simply take some dialogues, pick some dialogues, and just want to evaluate Shakespeare. So that is a kind of injustice. That's, let's go further. In order to know how and why Shakespeare excels other writers in depicting the sentiments that are true to life, we have to compare him with other renowned authors and their practices. Now, dear students, what Johnson says that if we want to compare, if we want to know the excellence of Shakespeare, the extraordinary qualities of Shakespeare, then we have to compare his qualities and the characteristics of his writing with the characteristics of other dramatists and writers and poets as well. So if we compare him, then we will understand his real worth. Now, a patient and laborious pursuit of his plays doesn't disqualify the reader for the visible world, whereas this may be the case of almost every other dramatist. In the dramas of these writers, we meet characters who are never seeing the human world. Their characters converse in a language which was never heard before. The topics upon which they speak are such as are not of any consequence in real life. This is very, very important. When you compare Shakespeare with other dramatists, what we observe that those dramatists, they invent characters who speak in a language which we have never heard. That means that is completely imaginary language. That is not realistic language. And the kind of world those playwrights and dramatists they create, it's an imaginary world. Their characters converse in a language which was never heard before, and the conversation they hold, this conversation is so impractical and so, bizarre that we have never heard the real life people or the people uh, conversing or having their conversation in this language. So their conversation, I mean the characters of those writers, the characters invented by those writers, they speak in a language which is completely unknown to us and which is impractical. The topics upon which they speak are such as are not of any consequence in real life, and the kind of topic they use in their conversation, this kind of topic we hardly focus on in real life. So what Johnson wants to establish that Shakespeare deals with practical things. The language the characters of Shakespeare use, the language is practical, realistic language. The topic with which they have their conversation, the topic is also lifelike and realistic, obviously. So that is the difference which we see, which we observe between Shakespeare and his contemporaries and other, not only contemporaries, other authors and dramatists. So from this point of view, Johnson thinks that Shakespeare is extraordinary. And in Shakespeare, the dialogue is not accidental. It is occasioned by the incident which products it or produces it. So, in the plays of other dramatists, what we see that the dialogues are artificial, they're accidental, they're rudimentary. They suddenly they appear. But in Shakespeare's play, what we see that the dialogues, the characters exchange. These dialogues are not accidental; they are natural outcome of their sentiments. It is so realistic and lucid that one does not come to think of it as belonging to a fanciful fiction. And the dialogues of Shakespeare's characters, they are so realistic and lucid that they are just the dialogues taken from our real life situation. It seems rather than the dialogue has been gleaned out of common conversation through a wise selection, and it seems that Shakespeare has taken the dialogues from our real life conversation. Now, what we see so far, the just representation of life, the just representation of nature, the just representation of human nature, and the just representation of everything, the dialogues, the characters, the conversation, the topic, the subject matter, and the financial reality, the social realities, everything what we observe in Shakespeare's plays are practical and lifelike. They're realistic, and they are the true representation of reality. There is no exaggeration of reality. So that is the extraordinary quality of Shakespeare, and according to Johnson, it's a merit of Shakespeare, positive side of Shakespeare. And the second point that Johnson emphasizes as the quality of William Shakespeare is, in a majority of the dramas of other dramatists, love is the universal agent that causes all good and evil and hastens or retards every action. That when other dramatists are taken into consideration, that then we see that in their drama is basically dominated by love, and every incident, springs from love, or love leads to every incident. So love is at the center of everything, as if there is no other sentiment in human life except love. And all the actions generate from love, or love leads to all the actions. And climax. Now, this is they are always busy with one sentiment, love. Love is a great sentiment. It's obviously something which we need in our life, without which it's not impossible to survive. But basically, over here, what Johnson wants to tell us, that this is the love that exists between a lover and the beloved. He is not talking about love of other kind, like love of a mother towards child, or love of a person towards humanity. He's not talking about that. He's talking about man-woman relationship. So in the plays of other writers or dramatists, what we observe, if we compare Shakespeare, that those dramatists are rather busy portraying the love affair between lovers, and every incident springs from that love, or that love leads to all the incidents, as I have already said. But Shakespeare is different. He has used other sentiments of human beings as well. And human beings are basically the embodiment of different types of sentiments, and love is one of them. In their fables, we meet stock characters such as a lover, a lady, and a rival. Stock characters means traditional characters, and those characters are, always surface the story. And what about the characters? There is a lover, there is a rival, who is rather familiar as a villain or a protagonist, antagonist, and a lady, or a girl or a woman. So that is the story. That is the story which is going, in all the dramas, which is being used as the plot or as the story in all the dramas of other playwrights. But Shakespeare didn't do that. His Hamlet is different from Macbeth. Is Macbeth different from King Lear? Julius Caesar is different from other plays. Midsummer Night's Dream, if we look at comedies, is different from As You Like It. As You Like It different from Twelfth Night. Twelfth Night is different from Comedy of Errors. So all the Comedy of Errors is different from The Tempest. The Tempest is different from Measure. So all the dramas of Shakespeare, whether they are tragedies, comedies, or tragicomedies. If you can also look at Romeo and Juliet. You can also look at The Merchant of Venice. So there are different types of dramas, and there are different types of characters, and we see in those dramas. So Shakespeare didn't use stock characters. It's not nothing like that. That the playwright is busy with simply a lover, a rival, and a lady. That's not the case with William Shakespeare. He's busy with the different types of characters. The society is a is a combination, is an embodiment of different types of characters. So Shakespeare refrained himself from using stock characters. These are involved in contrary obligations and haunted without violent but inconsistent desires. They are made to speak out in hyperbolic or exaggerated joy and outrageous sorrow. So the characters of those playwrights, other than Shakespeare, their characters speak in hyperbolic language. They always exaggerate their sentiments. They always exaggerate their joy and sorrows, whatever it is. But Shakespearean characters, they don't exaggerate their sentiments. Their joys, are also manifested in a practical way. Their sorrow is also expressed in a practical manner. And, but the characters of other dramatists, they always exaggerate, or they are made to exaggerate things rather. Actually, by doing so, these dramatists are violating probability and misrepresenting life. So when you make a lover, telling things which are lies, basically, everybody knows. So what does it indicate? It indicates that what the lover is saying is not real. So Shakespeare is realistic, but the comparison Johnson is making, in comparison to Shakespeare, the other dramatists, they are not realistic. They have violated the probability of sentiments. They have violated the probability of incidents. They have misrepresented life. So, but Shakespeare didn't misrepresent life. Shakespeare showed what would happen to Hamlet had he behaved in that manner. So Shakespeare showed what could have happened to Macbeth had he killed Duncan. So what can happen to King Lear, a father like King Lear, if he makes now gross mistakes like this? So depriving the daughter like Cordelia. So what we see in Shakespearean plays, that there is a practical ending, or there is the presence of realistic situation, realistic outcome of things or issues. So this outcome or these results, these impacts, these climax or these catastrophes, whatever you say, all these appear to be very much realistic, not improbable, or not the misinterpretation and misrepresentation of life. So that is the special quality of William Shakespeare. They depraved the language too. Love is not the only passion. It is just one among the many. I have already said that there are many passions in human beings. Love is one of them. Shakespeare never assigns any excessive role to this passion in his plays. So love is given the exact status. It's not that love is given the only status as a sentiment. There are other sentiments like hatred, like jealousy, hatred. There are other sentiments, sympathy. So those sentiments also are also given anger. So greed. Those sentiments are also given due priority in Shakespeare's plays. So Othello is jealous of watching his wife having conversation with others. King Lear, he is arrogant, he is proud, and that's why he makes mistakes. So he is driven by his passion of arrogance and pride. So if you look at Hamlet, you will see that he always philosophizes things, and he is a man of inaction. So he is always driven by his philosophy that is basically a kind of philosophy which is modern. That means inaction. If you look at Macbeth, you will see that he is driven by his sentiment of power, lust for power, and that is these are the ways how William Shakespeare you know delineates his different types of characters. So that is his extraordinary quality. For he catches his clues from the world of day-to-day life and exhibits in his plays what he finds in life. Shakespeare shows what he finds in real life situation. So his characters speak in real languages. The conversation you see in Shakespearean plays is real. He knew that any passion would cause happiness or disaster, depending on its being moderated or left uncontrolled. So what Shakespeare shows that as long as you can control your passions and emotions, you are fine, it's okay. But the moment you let your emotions and passions loose and let them go uncontrolled, then the passions will control you and you will be simply victim to your passions. And if those passions go uncontrolled, so naturally you will become a victim to either your anger or your greed or your jealousy or your excessive love, whatever it is, or your excessive philosophizing of life. So you will be a victim to that. So we see that the characters of Shakespeare's, I mean, the characters Shakespeare's invented in his plays, they become victim to different passions. So that is another quality of William Shakespeare. Shakespeare's methods of characterization individualized but universal. That's what I said at the beginning. That Shakespeare's characters are individuals but at the same time universal. So why? Because Hamlet is an individual. How he is an individual? Hamlet is different from Macbeth. Hamlet is a man of philosophy. He is a man of inaction. So he is a man, who is not active, who is passive. But it doesn't mean that he doesn't have physical strength. He has got the physical strength. He can murder. But those murder basically comes out of his instinct. So, it's not the result of a coordinated or the result of a reasoned murder or a reasoned, decision or reasoning. So, what Hamlet does, he can kill persons, but it's accidental. So, Hamlet's character is like Hamlet. Macbeth is different from Hamlet. Macbeth is a man of action. So he's a different type. But there are, as I said at the beginning, there are many Hamlets in the world. There are many Hamlets who will think that killing Claudius or eliminating Claudius cannot be the solution of eliminating evil from the universe. So this type of thoughts are basically, uh, puzzling many people across the globe. There are many people who are baffled by the philosophy and by the thought that what's the use of killing a person unless we can uproot the evil from the universe. The evil will continue to exist. So what is the benefit of killing Claudius? So that is Hamlet, always making philosophy of things. And ultimately what happens? He becomes a victim to his excessive philosophizing of things. And even after knowing the identity of his father's killer, he cannot make things happen. He cannot take revenge. So finally, he kills Claudius, but that's an accident because he himself has to sacrifice his life. Macbeth is different, and he is power monger. He wants to be the king, and he kills Duncan. So Macbeth is like himself, and there are many Macbeths in the world. There are many people in the world who will not hesitate to kill the kings to become the kings or to ascend to the throne. They will not hesitate. There are many people like Othello who are jealous of watching their wives talking to others and who are so stupid to believe that not to discover that just such a generous, such a beautiful minded girl like Desdemona. So there are many people like Othello, and ultimately they also commit suicide. There are many people like King Lear. There are many fathers like King Lear who misjudge their children, who cannot evaluate their children, who simply consider people their worth in terms of their verbal expression. So there are many people like King Lear. So King Lear is not a single man. King Lear is an individual. Obviously, King Lear is an individual different from Macbeth, Hamlet, or Othello. Othello is an individual different from King Lear, Macbeth, and Hamlet. So every character being invented by Shakespeare is an individual, but they are representatives of hundreds and thousands of characters in the world. That is the speciality of Shakespeare. There are thousands of hundreds and thousands and millions of Macbeth in the world. There are millions of King Lears in the world. There are millions of Othellos in the world. There are millions of Hamlets in the world. But it's not that Shakespeare confined himself to generating characters like Hamlet throughout his life. he generated characters of different species. So that he has many individuals, many types of individuals in his store, and those individuals represent millions of characters in the world. Shakespeare's characters are universally delineated, but it is easy to distinguish one from another. So you can easily distinguish Macbeth from Hamlet. Most of the speeches are so apt that they cannot be transplanted from the character to whom Shakespeare has given it. If you apply the dialogues of Macbeth to Hamlet, it will be simply unlikely, and you cannot match it. The dialogues of King Lear you cannot match with the dialogues of Othello. So the characters are so much individualized that even the dialogues of other characters will not suit them. Shakespeare's characters are not exaggerated, and Shakespeare didn't exaggerate the characters. He doesn't give us purely virtuous or utterly depraved characters. His characters are not 100% virtuous or 100% evil. We may even say he has no heroes as such in his play. So if we look at the characters of, the protagonists of Shakespearean plays, uh, it's difficult to say that they're heroes because they share strong, tragic flaws. They share, they have hamartia. On the contrary, it is the common humanity that he depicts. Why? Because his characters are not, the heroes who have no shortcomings or weaknesses. Rather, his characters are human beings. Even if they are kings, Shakespeare himself also could not, change the tradition. He had to use the extraordinary characters as the protagonists of his plays. We see the changes of, using common human beings as protagonists only in modern age. Before that, all the protagonists of the plays were taken from upper class society, and Shakespeare also didn't make the change. But what is exceptional in Shakespeare, even his extraordinary protagonists basically represent the human beings of the world. The King Lear is a king, but King Lear, it doesn't simply represent the kings or the fathers simply who are kings or simply who are enjoying good status in the society. King Lear basically represents all fathers in the world, not simply the rich fathers, not simply the kingly fathers, not simply the aristocratic fathers. King Lear represents all the fathers. So that is the charisma of William Shakespeare. His characters obviously came of upper class families, but despite being representative of upper class, they basically represent the sentiments of people of their species, regardless of the class. The characters act and speak in a way which appears to the reader to be what he himself would have done in a similar situation. So what Hamlet does, probably I would also do, put into the similar situation, if put into the similar situation. What King Lear did, probably I would also do. Many fathers would also do. Listening to the beautiful words of the elder two daughters, and depriving the youngest one. Even when the plot requires a supernatural agency, the tone of the dialogues of various characters are lifelike and realistic. Other writers draw the most natural passions and most common incidents in a way which makes them unrecognizable. Even the supernatural machinery is used by William Shakespeare. We see the ghost of old Hamlet in the play Hamlet. We see the three witches in Macbeth. We see the fairies being used in Midsummer Night's Dream. So Shakespeare uses the supernatural machineries in such a way that they become inseparable part of the life of the uh, characters. So supernatural machineries have been used by William Shakespeare in a very realistic manner, and they become inseparable part of the play. Shakespeare, so basically, he represents human nature not merely as it reacts to the common situations of real life, but also as it may act in extraordinary situations. And his characters, they uh, behave in a way which is completely practical. Reflection of life another character quality of William Shakespeare. Other dramatists gain attention only by presenting fabulous, exaggerated characters which confuse our imagination. Other writers, other playwrights, other dramatists, they're always busy with showing characters who exaggerate things, and it becomes very difficult for us to understand because we have never seen such characters. We have never listened to these dialogues in our life. Those feverish can be cured by reading Shakespeare's plays where we meet human sentiments in human language. But when you read Shakespeare, you will see the reflection of life. His plays are informative and instructive. So his plays are full of information and there is instruction, no matter who the reader is. And who is the reader, that doesn't matter. The reader can come from any class, but he will enjoy the play by William Shakespeare. A confessor as well as a sagacious hermit can draw lessons from practical wisdom from them. So, what kind of person you are, that doesn't matter. Whether you are a sinner or you are a wise person or you are a monk, that doesn't matter. Every person will get interest reading William Shakespeare because he portrays life in what or as it is. So Shakespeare's delineation of characters, Shakespeare's delineation of the sentiments, his delineation of life is fully practical and realistic, which other playwrights couldn't do. They exaggerated. That's exactly what Johnson says in this essay. So I want to stop here today. I discussed the merits of Shakespeare. In next class, I will discuss the objections that were raised against William Shakespeare by other writers, and Samuel Johnson will refute, and he will show his arguments to refute those allegations and accusations. So I hope that you will again attend the next class. So till then, goodbye. Thank you very much.